Welcome back, everybody, to 31 1990s horror movies for Halloween, where I'm counting down my favorite horror movies from the 1990s. So, we're at number 15 today, and at number 15 we got a Stephen King movie, one of the most notorious Stephen King movies, one of the most loved Stephen King movies, and that, of course, is Misery.
We're put on this earth to help people, Paul. Like I'm trying to help you. Please, help me help you.
A lot of times when people think of Stephen King, they think of more supernatural kind of stuff, like Christine, The Shining, Pet Sematary, but he did a good job at making some non-supernatural horror, like Cujo and Misery. And the movies are fantastic. I mean, I think Cujo is Stephen King's most underrated movie, or the most underrated movie based on a Stephen King story. And Misery, of course, is a classic. So many people know about it. You have to respect a movie that can be suspenseful as hell while mostly taking place in one location. Fans of this movie, you all know the plot. You have a writer named Paul who was an author of this series of books known as the Misery books. The main character in the series was Misery. And he just finished the last Misery novel where he killed off the character so he could stop and move on to something else. One thing leads to another when he's on his way home or somewhere. It's during a bad snowstorm, his car goes flying off the road, he gets injured. Next thing you know, he wakes up in this bedroom in a house owned by Annie Wilks, his #1 fan.
You're gonna be just fine. I'll take good care of you. I'm your #1 fan.
And of course, Annie Wilks, being his #1 fan, is obsessed with him. She's obsessed with his books. Misery is her favorite character. She loves these movies more. She loves these books more than life itself. And of course, Paul Sheldon, both his legs are broken, his arm is messed up, he's been severely injured due to this storm, and he's trapped in Annie's bedroom. Anyway, as he's healing in her house, she eventually reads the final Misery book, finds out that Misery is dead, and she loses it.
Misery spirit is still alive.
I don't want her dead! I want her! And you murdered her!
She eventually forces Paul to write a new book, bringing Misery back to life, and is growing more and more obsessed with him as he stays in her house. And you know it's going to lead to some very bad things. But that's pretty much the whole story. It's just an author trapped in a house of this obsessed fan who is severely mentally unstable. And it works so well. It's so suspenseful. I love movies like this where someone is helpless against another character who clearly has the upper hand and is basically just keeping them as a prisoner. It's one thing to make a movie scary by killing off a bunch of people, having a good body count, and people dying one by one by one by one by one. But it's also terrifying when a villain may not have a huge body count, but they just have complete control over one person's life. They are just, they are just messing with this one person. And that can be terrifying because it makes the movie more personal. We're not just following the journey of a bunch of characters, we're following the journey of this one character who's at the mercy of someone who is more powerful than they are, at least at this period of time.
Nobody knows you're here. And you better hope nothing happens to me. Because if I die, you die.
We never like to be in a position where we have no control. We all like to think that we have control over our lives, and when we're put in a situation when we have no control, that we're in a very, very vulnerable state at that point. Nobody wants to be in that situation. Now, everybody talks about Kathy Bates in this movie, and rightfully so. She did a great job as Annie Wilks. She did an amazing job at coming off as so friendly and sweet at one moment, and absolutely psychotic in the next moment.
In the bank, do I tell Mrs. Bollinger, oh, here's one big bastard of a check. Give me some of your Christing money? There, look there. See what you made me do?
just switching back and forth between these two personalities in the snap of a finger, it's so good. But James Caan deserves some praise as well. He does a great job as Paul, just in this vulnerable situation, having to act while lying in a bed for most of the movie. It's hard to act without making a lot of motions, and he couldn't really do it because he's injured. He has an injured arm, he has injured legs, so he has to portray so much with just his face mostly, and I love good face acting, and he has good face acting.
No, I didn't.
Who did?
No one. She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away?
So many times, you know, in these movies, the protagonist is only as good as their antagonist, and the antagonist is only as good as their protagonist. And while a lot of times the antagonist can outshine the protagonist because they're ones who are allowed to be evil, they need a good protagonist to make them effective. Yes, Batman would not be much without the Joker, but the Joker would not be much without Batman. You need that balance, and Misery has a perfect balance. As great as Annie Wilkes is, Paul Sheldon is a great protagonist, a great foil for her in this whole situation. And then, of course, you have the infamous hobbling scene. Everybody, all I have to say is, I'm sorry.
God's sake.
It's for the best.
Eddie, please!
I had to show it. I had to show it. Ow. I won't go into too much detail on this right now, because I did a whole video on this in my series Art of the Scare. I went into so much detail about the hobbling scene alone, so if you want to hear more about that, go watch that. But all I will say is, one, when I first saw this scene, I had a limp for a little while, because it is very effective. You can feel it. And two, this is one of my favorite movies to watch with other people, just to see their reaction to this scene, because it's always the same. She pulls out the sledgehammer, they say, "Oh no, I don't want to see this," but then they look back, because the movie hasn't really been violent up until this point, so you don't know if you're going to see anything, and then they see something and you get a very big reaction from people. Like, they go all out when this happens, going, "Oh no, oh my god." So the reactions to the hobbling scene are always the same. She pulls out the sledgehammer, they go, "No, I don't want to see it." But then they look back because they're wondering, wait, are we going to see something? Yes, we are. Oh god, I can't believe I looked. So, yeah, the hobbling scene. You know, you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about.
God, I love you.
But yes, Misery, it is a movie that is suspenseful while taking place mostly in one location. It's just about this crazed fan who has complete control over this author's life, and that's enough. So many times, I've said this before, simplicity can be so scary, and this is a very simple movie that's one of the most suspenseful and frightening movies of the 1990s. Misery may not be your typical horror movie to watch around Halloween, but it is a great movie. It's scary, it's suspenseful, so it's a perfect movie to watch for Halloween. And I do say, watch it with someone who has not seen it before, just so you can get their reaction to the hobbling scene. It'll be a good time. So yes, watch Misery with a friend and see them lose their mind once Annie Wilkes swings that sledgehammer.
They just cheated us!